This is the Phrozen Sonic Mighty 8K. So we pulled that out of the box, and underneath the printer itself is a small box of parts. It's kind of embedded in the foam at the bottom. So if you're wondering where that is, that's where you'll find it. Before I pull this off here, we're just going to take a look at what's in here. So we've got our warranty card and what looks like a quick start guide. Yep, just to get us started, explaining the different components and the size of the machine, the specs. So this machine is going to give us an XY resolution of 0.028 millimeters. So that means that the detail will be able to print in the XY plane is that. And the Z plane, which is the raise, we can go as low as 0.01 millimeters and as high as 0.3. The printing speed at best is 70 millimeters per hour, and it's a 24 volt machine. It's using Chitdu, which is not super surprising, and there's a 5-inch touchscreen on the front. We have some stickers, always important, and a small 80 grit sanding pad. In here we've got a series of hex wrenches or Allen keys and a little picture that illustrates which size key is for which screws or bolts. Not that difficult to figure out, but kind of neat, I guess. USB stick and a small Wi-Fi adapter, 802.11n, so wireless N Wi-Fi adapter. Power cord for different regions, so we're going to be using this one. This matches our plug. This is another standard. And we are 110 volts here. An external power supply, your standard power brick like your laptop might have. And this is just an auto switching, so it'll work for 100 to 240 volts. So that goes like that. We've got a sharpened metal scraper for getting items off the build plate. Our standard plastic scraper for the vat. A funnel to pour our used resin back into the bottles. You'd normally want to pour that through a filter like a paint strainer or other filter medium, just to make sure that there's no hardened bits that are getting back into your original bottle of resin. And then there's 2 screws, which I believe are going to hold the vat to the printer, kind of hold it stationary, so there's those. And then a set of gloves here. Now this printer is clean, so I'm not going to be using gloves, but you should always use gloves if there's going to be resin involved in any way. So we're going to take the lid off and we'll get all this packaging removed here. So in the top here, there's the build plate and a couple other parts. So pull this out, there we go. So we've got the vat. And the vat does have protective film on the bottom here with this little red tag, so you're going to want to make sure you remove that before you try printing. There's the build plate with this cool little pattern, and it's kind of textured. It's hard to describe actually. It looks smooth at first glance, but you can feel the texture of those lines. Now, I wouldn't normally want to touch it with my fingers, so before I try printing on this, I'm going to wipe it down with isopropyl alcohol as well, just to make sure it's all clean. So just before I turn anything on, I'm going to remove the protective film on the LCD screen. And there's also protective film on the lens of the webcam here. So on the back here, we're obviously going to plug the power cord into here, and we'll turn on the switch. You can also see that there's another USB port and a hardwired Ethernet port if you're not interested in using the Wi-Fi. And on the front, we have another USB port, of course. Okay, so we can name our printer. I'm going to be original and just leave that. We are operating in English. Well, let's do a Wi-Fi connection. So in this case, we don't have a hardwire connection here, so I'm going to use that little dongle here, and we're going to plug it into the back port, just leave us our front port free for print jobs. So with the dongle plugged in, we'll hit connect, and now it's showing us any of the Wi-Fis that it's able to detect. In my case, my normal hotspot is a wireless AC, not wireless N, so it's not going to find it, but we've got this network that we can connect to. So after a little while, it says connection success. I'll hit OK, and for some reason I'm back at this screen and it shows no network connected. So I guess I'll just hit skip for now, and we'll continue through and we'll get it connected to the network later on. Please follow these steps to conduct the LCD test, calibrate your Z-axis, and perform the printing test. So next, the printer will test the LCD in 3 different modes: light up, light grid, and black. Okay, the whole screen is lit up, and I can see that there's no dead pixels in there. And now there's a grid. Looks just like that. And then the screen is off, which I can see a light glow, but not like full on was. Okay, and next, remove the resin vat, place an A4 paper on the LCD. So A4, just like standard printer paper. So I've got a full sheet of 8.5 by 11 printer paper, and we'll hit next. Install the building plate and tighten the knob screw. So the building plate here, build plate, and I can actually see there is a little bit of resin here. I guess it's factory tested, so I'm gonna wipe this resin off and grab some rubbing alcohol to do so. So I'm going to put this in here, loosen the knob. Tighten it on there. Okay, and then next, loosen all 4 screws as it shows here, so 2 on either side. I mentioned before this little card that shows you the size of the Allen key that you're going to need for which screws on the printer, and we're doing the Z calibration screws, so we're doing those ones. That's number 3. We'll loosen all 4 of these. So now this is just kind of floating here, and then we'll hit next. Okay, tighten the screws and the calibration is complete. So it just kind of raised up a little bit and went back down. And so I will press down on the center of either side as I kind of tighten these. So all 4 are tight, and we'll hit done. And it should probably rise right to the top. I can pull this out, and now we could put in the vat. So as it's moving up, I'm going to remove the film off the bottom of the vat that I didn't do before. And we can see that there's 15 millimeter linear rails with these chunky blocks on there, so that'll keep everything nice and stable. And we can now place this. There's little indents in the bottom, so it'll kind of drop right in like that. Those 2 screws that we looked at earlier go in here. Tighten that down. So now's a good time to take some rubbing alcohol and soft paper towel or lint-free cloth and wipe down the inside of the vat and the underside of the build plate here. Just make sure that there's no finger grease or debris or anything on them. You want those to be clean. Okay, so now we're going to print the XP finder. So this is going to help us determine how much exposure time we need for the resin that we're using. And this little message here at the bottom says, if you're not using the Phrozen Aqua Gray 8K resin, then don't proceed. So we're not going to hit next because the test print will be kind of set for sane values for that particular resin. So we're going to go other resins, and we're provided a QR code here. So you can scan this QR code and it'll take you to a website with instructions on how to complete your test print. And that's the little XP print that they use. In the past, we've used other test prints, and so we're probably going to opt to use those. Congratulations, and hit OK. All right, now we're ready to print. We can throw in the SD card and print some test models, slice our XP test print and print that beforehand just to make sure that we know what our exposure settings are. And let's just poke around here a little bit. So we've got history and local file. Local file is currently empty. History is empty. If we go to the gear, we've got Z-axis controls. This is where we can raise and lower the build plate there. Under vat cleaning, so this is where it would do a full screen exposure, and then you can scrape off a layer of cured resin off the bottom to get any little floating bits out of there. Language settings, network settings, which you can do Wi-Fi or hardwired. We're currently not connected. System, we've got like system standby time, our printer name, beeping, standard kind of things. Hardware testing, this is where we can test the cooling fan and the LCD. We can also test the camera and make sure that that's working, and it is. And we could reset to factory defaults. If we get out of here and we go to information, there's error log and then just general information about the printer. And we saw the firmware version on a previous page there, QR code to social media, help, etc. Okay, so let's do some XP tests and come back with our test prints. Okay, we're back, and we used 3D Resin Solutions resin on here, the Fast V2, and we used what they call the Starship test print for finding your resin exposure times. And as you can see in the close-ups, this turned out perfect. Some of the very thin pillars here almost like fall over under their own weight. They're extremely thin, almost like a hair thickness. But there's minimal overexposure on a couple of these. Some of the voids at the bottom here, they're kind of blended together. You can't see crisp little square holes, if you will. So that means our exposure times were a little bit long on this one. This was done at 2.3 seconds, so we might be able to bring that down to 2.1 seconds. But the rest of it looks very, very good, and all the details are crisp and sharp. So using 2.3 seconds, we then printed these two items. This one still has the supports on it, so I can show you taking off those supports. There's this little statue here, turned out flawless, and then this little dice, and with any luck, the supports break off. Now, with it being overexposed slightly, those supports are going to be a little more marring to the surface. And so just kind of scratching at them with your nail should remove what's left there. But anyway, the details on that are very good as well, if not slightly overexposed. So some of the sharpness of void cavities will be lost because it will be overexposed and kind of bleed into that, if that makes sense. So all that to say, make sure that you have your resin exposure dialed in as close as possible for that particular resin. And those exposure settings can even change based on the resin itself. If you have a translucent resin, it may need more or less exposure than if you have a very dark opaque resin. So just don't kind of do one setting and assume it's going to print exactly the same for clear as it does for white or black, for example. But anyway, there you have it, our first prints and our first look at the Sonic Mega 8K. Hopefully you found that useful, and remember, like and subscribe and ring the bell down below to get notified when we upload more videos like this. Thanks for watching.